The story we are about to share today is not just about a man, but about a dream that changed the world. It is the story of a poor boy who, guided by heavenly visions, became the father of thousands of orphans and the founder of one of the greatest charitable works of the Catholic Church. This is the life of Saint John Bosco, the apostle of youth, the builder of basilicas, and the master of dreams. John Melchior Bosco was born on the night of August 16, 1815, in the small village of Becchi in the Piedmont region of northern Italy. These were difficult times. Europe was still recovering from the devastation of the Napoleonic Wars, and the Italian countryside was suffering from hunger and drought. The Bosco family was humble, working as sharecroppers for the Moglia family. When little John was just over 2 years old, tragedy struck the household. His father, Francesco, suddenly died of pneumonia. The young widow, Margherita Occhiena, found herself alone with 3 boys to raise: Antonio, from Francesco's first marriage, Joseph, and little John, as well as her elderly and ill mother-in-law. Mother Margherita, as she would come to be known, was the rock of the family. Illiterate but possessing profound spiritual wisdom, she shaped John's character with firm love, teaching him to see God in the beauty of nature and in daily providence. At 9 years old, John had the first of a series of prophetic dreams that would guide his entire life, a dream that was indelibly etched in his memory and which he would later describe as the compass of his vocation. He saw himself in a large courtyard near his home, where a crowd of boys was playing. Some laughed, ran, and enjoyed themselves innocently, but others blasphemed and uttered terrible curses. Outraged by the offenses against God, little John threw himself into the midst of them, throwing punches and kicks to silence them, using physical force to try to command respect. Suddenly, a man of majestic appearance appeared, in the prime of life, dressed in a white and radiant cloak that dazzled the eyes. The man called him by name, told him to stand before those boys, and said in a calm but firm voice, "It is not with blows, but with gentleness and charity that you must win these friends of yours. Begin immediately to instruct them on how ugly sin is and the beauty of virtue." Confused, frightened, and feeling incapable of such a task, John asked who he was to order such difficult things of an ignorant boy. The man replied, "I am the son of the one your mother taught you to greet 3 times a day." At that moment, a woman of majestic beauty appeared beside him, dressed in a resplendent cloak that seemed made of stars. She gently took John by the hand and showed him the boys, who, to John's amazement, had transformed into rabid dogs, wildcats, fierce bears, and other frightening animals. "This is your field, this is where you must work," she said with motherly sweetness. "Become humble, strong, and robust, and what you will see happen now to these animals, you will do with my children." As she spoke, the beasts, in the blink of an eye, turned into gentle lambs, joyfully skipping and bleating around the man and woman, as if celebrating a great feast. John woke up crying, his hands aching from the punches he had imagined throwing, but with his heart marked by a mystery that would take years to fully understand. That dream was not just a childish fantasy, it was the divine blueprint for the salvation of countless souls. That dream marked John forever. He understood that his mission would be to educate young people, not by force, but by love. To attract the boys from the neighborhood and keep them away from bad company, he taught himself magic tricks, juggling, and balancing acts by watching street performers at local fairs. On Sundays, he gathered the children in a meadow, put on his show, and, as admission, required everyone to pray the rosary and listen to the priest's sermon repeated. Despite his brilliant intelligence and burning desire to study for the priesthood, poverty was an almost insurmountable obstacle. His older half-brother Antonio fiercely opposed John's studies, demanding that he work in the fields. "He's a peasant like us," Antonio would shout. The fights became so intense that, at 12 years old, John had to leave home and work as a servant on the Moglia family farm. It was only at 15, with the help of a kind priest, Don Colosso, that John was able to begin studying seriously. After Don Colosso's sudden death, John had to beg and work as a tailor, shoemaker, blacksmith, and waiter to pay for his studies in Chieri. Finally, in 1835, he entered the seminary. On June 5, 1841, the eve of Trinity Sunday, John Bosco was ordained a priest in Turin. He was 26 years old. From that day on, he would be simply known as Don Bosco. Turin at the time was a city undergoing rapid and chaotic industrialization, the epicenter of social transformations in Piedmont. Thousands of young peasants, fleeing hunger and misery in the countryside, migrated to the city seeking work in the new factories and construction sites. However, what they found was brutal exploitation, inhuman working hours, misery, and total abandonment. Without family, education, or protection, many ended up on the streets, forming gangs, and inevitably in prison. Don Bosco, newly ordained and guided by his wise spiritual director, Saint Joseph Cafasso, began visiting the prisons of Turin, especially the La Generala prison. What he saw in those damp, dark dungeons broke his heart and defined his mission forever. Boys of 12, 14, 16 years old crowded into filthy cells, their faces hardened by crime, despair, and lack of love. Many were there for petty thefts, driven by hunger. Seeing those young people, who could have been good citizens if they had been given a chance, rotting in prison, Don Bosco wept bitterly. He promised himself and God, "I must do the impossible. I must spend every last drop of my blood to prevent these young people from ending up here. They need a friend, a father, someone to show them the way before it is too late." Thus was born the idea of the oratory. It was not just a church for prayer, but a completely new concept of youth ministry. A home that welcomed with familial warmth, a parish that evangelized with joy, a school that guided toward professional life, and a vibrant courtyard to meet as friends and play freely. The first official meeting, which marked the beginning of the Salesian work, took place on December 8, 1841, the Feast of the Immaculate Conception. Don Bosco was preparing to celebrate Mass at the Church of St. Francis of Assisi when the sacristan began chasing away with brooms a ragged young boy who had entered the sacristy to warm himself. Don Bosco immediately intervened, called the boy over, and asked his name. It was Bartholomew Gorelli, a 16-year-old orphaned bricklayer, illiterate, and who did not even know how to make the sign of the cross. Don Bosco did not scold him. Instead, with immense gentleness, he taught him to make the sign of the cross and prayed the first Hail Mary of the oratory with him. At the end, he invited him to return the following Sunday and bring his friends. The next week, Bartholomew brought half a dozen friends. Soon there were dozens, then hundreds of noisy, hungry, and energetic boys who found in Don Bosco the father they had never had. In the early years, the oratory was a traveling work, a true, quote, parish without a roof. They had no fixed headquarters and met in meadows, abandoned cemeteries, and public squares. They were expelled from several places because the deafening noise of hundreds of boys playing disturbed the neighbors, and many priests and authorities viewed that gathering of ragged youths with suspicion, fearing they were a threat to public order or that Don Bosco was fomenting a revolution. Some even thought Don Bosco had gone mad and tried to have him committed to an asylum. But he remained steadfast, trusting in the promises of Our Lady. Finally, at Easter 1846, after many trials and tears, Don Bosco managed to rent a miserable warehouse and a piece of land in the outskirts neighborhood of Valdocco, owned by a man named Francesco Pinardi. That humble warehouse, which had once served as a storage shed, was transformed into a chapel and will become the definitive cradle of the magnificent Salesian work. In Valdocco, Don Bosco's work expanded prodigiously. He realized that teaching catechism on Sundays was not enough. It was necessary to care for the entire life of those young boys. He began seeking honest jobs for the boys during the week, and, to protect them from unscrupulous employers, he drafted and signed the first apprenticeship contracts in Italy's history, guaranteeing basic rights, Sunday rest, and the prohibition of physical punishment. When he noticed that many boys arriving from the countryside had nowhere to sleep and ended up sleeping under bridges, facing serious moral and physical dangers, Don Bosco began sheltering them in his own home, in the attic of the Pinardi building. To help him with this Herculean task, he called upon his mother. Mama Margherita, already elderly, left the tranquility of her little country house in Becchi to live with her son in chaotic Turin, becoming the loving mother, cook, laundress, and counselor to hundreds of orphans. Over time, to ensure that the boys learned a dignified trade without leaving the protected environment of the oratory, Don Bosco opened his own professional workshops. First shoemaking and tailoring, then bookbinding, carpentry, and printing, creating the first modern vocational schools in Italy. Don Bosco's educational method was absolutely revolutionary for the 19th century. At a time when education, both in schools and reformatories, was based almost exclusively on a repressive system, fear, severe punishments, and physical discipline, Don Bosco proposed a radically different approach: the preventative system. This system did not seek to punish wrongdoing after it occurred, but rather to prevent the young person from erring by creating an environment so positive, familiar, and stimulating that sin and indiscipline lost their appeal. Don Bosco's preventive system rested on three inseparable pillars: reason, religion, and amorevolezza, an Italian word that conveys a loving kindness, a demonstrated and perceptible affection. Reason meant that rules should not be imposed arbitrarily or authoritatively, but explained to the young people so they could understand the meaning and necessity of discipline for their own good. Religion was the heart of the system. Don Bosco believed that true education was impossible without God's grace, without frequenting the sacraments of confession and communion, and without tender devotion to Our Lady. Religion in the oratory was not a heavy burden, but a source of joy and peace. And finally, amorevolezza, loving kindness. Don Bosco insisted that it was not enough to love the young people. It was essential that they perceive and feel that they are loved. Let the young not only be loved, but know that they are loved. He often told his educators. He firmly believed that in every young person, even the most rebellious, hardened, or corrupted, there is always a point accessible to good, a sensitive string in the heart. The sacred duty of the educator is to patiently and lovingly seek out this sensitive string and make it vibrate, awakening in the young person the desire to be better. In the oratory, the constant and friendly presence of educators among the young, participating in their games and conversations, what Don Bosco called assistants, was the key to creating this atmosphere of trust and familiarity. Among the thousands of young people who passed through the oratory, one shone with his own light: Dominic Savio. Born in 1842, Dominic was a boy of fragile health, but with an impressive spiritual maturity. At 7 years old, on the day of his first communion, he wrote 4 resolutions. 1. I will confess very often and receive Holy Communion whenever the confessor allows me. 2. I want to sanctify feast days. 3. My friends will be Jesus and Mary. 4. I would rather die than sin. Dominic met Don Bosco in October 1854. The encounter was remarkable. The boy said to the priest, I am the cloth, and you are the tailor. Make me a beautiful garment for the Lord. At the oratory, Dominic became Don Bosco's right hand among the boys. He founded the Company of the Immaculate Conception, a group of young people dedicated to helping the more difficult peers and promoting purity and piety. The relationship between Don Bosco and Dominic Savio was one of deep spiritual communion. Don Bosco saw in the boy the perfect embodiment of his educational ideal: holiness in joy and in fulfilling daily duties. Dominic, in turn, found in Don Bosco the sure guide to perfection. On one occasion, Don Bosco preached that holiness was easy and that God wanted it from everyone. Dominic took this seriously and asked how he could become a saint. Don Bosco replied, "Serve the Lord with joy. Holiness consists in always being joyful, doing your duties well, and helping your companions." Unfortunately, Dominic's health worsened. In March 1857, at 14 years old, he had to leave the oratory to return to his parents' home, hoping to recover. When saying goodbye to Don Bosco, Dominic wept, sensing they would never see each other again on this earth. On March 9, 1857, after receiving the last sacraments, Dominic opened his eyes, smiled, and said, "Oh, what beautiful things I see." Then he gave his soul to God. Don Bosco wrote the boy's biography, which became a bestseller and inspired generations. Dominic Savio was canonized in 1954 by Pope Pius XII, becoming the youngest non-martyr saint of the Church at that time. Dominic Savio's presence in Don Bosco's life did not end with his physical death. The communion of saints kept them united. On December 6, 1876, 19 years after the young saint's death, Don Bosco had one of his most extraordinary and detailed dreams, known as the Dream of the Salesian Garden, or the Dream of Lonzo. In this dream, Don Bosco suddenly found himself before an immense, vast, and luminous plain that resembled a sea of polished crystal. The region was divided into gardens of indescribable beauty, with enormous avenues and flower beds of shapes and colors never seen on earth. The trees were not ordinary. Their leaves were pure gold, trunks and stems of sparkling diamond, and each plant shone with its own light. A celestial music, indescribable and perfectly harmonious, filled the air, produced by 100,000 invisible instruments and choirs of voices singing, "Health, honor, glory to God, the Almighty Father." While Don Bosco was ecstatic with this vision, an innumerable crowd of young people came to meet him. Many were boys who had passed through the oratory and had already died. At the head of all, leading the crowd with a sweet and radiant smile, was Dominic Savio. He was radiant, dressed in a pure white tunic that reached his feet, woven entirely with golden threads and studded with diamonds. A wide red sash girded his sides, richly embroidered with precious gems forming marvelous designs. Around his neck hung a necklace of luminous flowers, whose leaves looked like diamonds joined on golden stems. Dominic's head was crowned with roses, and his wavy hair fell over his shoulders, giving him the appearance of a true angel. Don Bosco, trembling with reverence and confusion, could barely speak. Dominic approached and, with filial affection, asked why he was so silent and frightened. Don Bosco asked if that wonderful place was paradise, the reward of the righteous. Dominic smiled and explained that it was not. It was only a place of natural happiness, where temporal goods were enjoyed, though greatly beautified by God's power. No mortal eye, Dominic explained, could see the eternal beauties of true paradise while still united to the body. To demonstrate the difference between the natural light of that garden and the supernatural light of God, Dominic asked Don Bosco to look deep into that sea of crystal. Suddenly, at a vast distance, a spark of light shone, thin as a thread but so piercing and dazzling that Don Bosco's eyes could not bear it. He immediately closed his eyes and let out a cry so loud that it woke Father Lemoyne, who was sleeping in the next room. Dominic explained that this tiny thread of light was 100 million times brighter than the sun, yet it was still only natural light enlivened by God, not the true light of paradise, which is God himself. After this moment of awe, the dream took a deeply pastoral turn. Dominic presented Don Bosco with a magnificent bouquet of flowers, explaining the meaning of each one for the salvation of young people. The roses symbolized charity, the violets, humility, the sunflowers, obedience, the gentian, penance, the wheat ears, frequent communion, the lilies, purity, and the everlastings, perseverance. Dominic emphasized that purity was the virtue that shone most brightly in paradise, and that the mist preventing young people from seeing heavenly things was the sin of impurity. But the most striking revelation was yet to come. Dominic showed Don Bosco the current spiritual state of the boys living in the oratory. He presented 3 lists. The first contained the names of the young men who were in God's grace, invulnerable to the devil's attacks. The second list, very painful for Don Bosco, revealed the names of those in mortal sin, living in enmity with God. The third list showed the young men on the edge of the abyss, in grave danger of perdition. Dominic urged Don Bosco to work tirelessly for them, recommending frequent confession, communion, avoidance of idleness, and prayer. This dream not only deeply comforted Don Bosco with the certainty of the glory of his spiritual children, but also gave him clear, urgent, and precise guidance for the salvation of the young people still under his care on earth. Don Bosco's dreams were true prophetic visions. He had more than 150 recorded dreams that guided his decisions, warned of dangers, and revealed the future of the church and his work. One of the most famous is the Dream of the 2 Columns from 1862. In it, Don Bosco saw the church as a great ship, commanded by the Pope, sailing on a stormy sea and attacked by an enemy fleet. The ship of the church found safe harbor only when the Pope anchored it between 2 great columns rising from the sea. a larger one topped with the consecrated host and the inscription, Salvation of the Believers, and a smaller one bearing the image of the Virgin Mary and the inscription, Help of Christians. This dream prophesied the Church's tribulations and pointed to the Eucharist and Marian devotion as the anchors of salvation. Devotion to Our Lady Help of Christians was not merely a personal piety for Don Bosco, it was the beating heart, the driving force, and the shield of his entire apostolate. He was convinced that the Virgin Mary was the true founder and sustainer of his work. In 1844, the Virgin Mary appeared to him in a memorable dream and revealed the exact location of the martyrdom of the ancient patron saints of Turin, Solitor, Adventor, and Octavius, soldiers of the Theban legion who shed their blood for Christ in the early centuries. In the dream, Mary explicitly asked that on that sacred ground, sanctified by the blood of the martyrs, a great church be built in her honor. For many years, Don Bosco kept this divine request in the silence of his heart, for the material reality was discouraging. He had not a penny. The oratory struggled daily to feed the boys, and the idea of building a basilica seemed sheer madness. Yet God's plans have their appointed time. In 1863, Our Lady appeared again to Don Bosco in a dream, this time with an imperative message full of promises. Hic est domus mea inde gloria mea. This is my house, from here will come my glory. Faced with this renewed command, Don Bosco no longer hesitated. He hired the architect Antonio Spezia, who took inspiration from the facade of the Church of San Giorgio Maggiore in Venice, and began construction of the Basilica of Mary Help of Christians in 1865. The cornerstone was laid on April 27th of that year, in the presence of Prince Amedeo of Savoy. Don Bosco's boldness was astonishing. He began the monumental work with only 40 cents in his pocket, handing it to the foreman Carlo Buzzetti, who had been one of the first boys of the oratory. When asked how he would pay for the construction, Don Bosco responded with unwavering faith. "I did nothing. It was Our Lady who did everything. She will build her own house." And so it was. The construction of the basilica became a continuous and visible succession of miracles and extraordinary graces. The work was funded almost entirely by donations from people who had received favors through the intercession of Mary Help of Christians. When the day came to pay the workers and the treasury was empty, Don Bosco did not despair. He prayed, sent his priests to pray, and invariably, unexpected donations arrived at just the right moment, often brought by strangers, who recounted miraculous healings or solutions to insoluble problems after promising an offering to the Virgin's Church. Seriously ill people were instantly cured. Families on the brink of financial ruin were saved, all in response to faith in the help of Christians and generosity toward her basilica. The basilica was completed and solemnly consecrated on June 9, 1868, a record time of only 3 years after the start of construction, a remarkable achievement for the era and the initial financial conditions. It is a majestic monument in the neoclassical style, rising imposingly in the Valdocco neighborhood, becoming the heart and spiritual center of the entire Salesian family spread throughout the world. At the high altar, dominating the sanctuary, is the grand and iconic painting of Mary Help of Christians, created by the artist Tommaso Lorenzon. The painting was not merely the product of the artist's imagination, but was executed according to Don Bosco's meticulous and precise instructions, who described exactly how he had seen the Virgin in his dreams. Majestic, crowned with stars, holding the child Jesus and a scepter, surrounded by the apostles and evangelists. Lorenzon later confessed that, while painting the Virgin's face, he felt an invisible force guiding his hand. In 1903, Pope Leo XIII granted the canonical coronation to the image, and in 1911, Pope Pius X elevated the sanctuary to the dignity of a minor basilica. Today, the Basilica of Mary Help of Christians is not only an architectural monument, but a sacred reliquary. It houses the mortal remains of Saint John Bosco himself, the young Saint Dominic Savio, Saint Mary Dominica Mazzarello, co-founder of the Salesian Sisters, Saint Joseph Benedict Cotolingo, and the Venerable Mother Margaret. In the crypt rest also the blessed successors of Don Bosco, such as Michael Rua and Philip Rinaldi, along with thousands of relics of other Catholic saints. It is a beacon of faith, a testimony in stone and art, that when God and the Virgin Mary command a work, they themselves provide the means to accomplish it. To ensure the continuity of his vast work, and to guarantee that the spirit of the oratory would survive his own death, Don Bosco realized the need to found a religious congregation. On December 18, 1859, with a small group of young men who had grown up in the oratory, among them Michael Rua and John Cagliero, he officially founded the Society of St. Francis de Sales, whose members would become known worldwide as the Salesians. He chose St. Francis de Sales, the Holy Bishop of Geneva, as the patron and model of the new congregation because of his extraordinary gentleness, inexhaustible patience, and pastoral charity, virtues essential for those who wish to educate troubled youth. Don Bosco often repeated St. Francis de Sales's maxim, "You catch more flies with a drop of honey than with a barrel of vinegar." But Don Bosco's vision was comprehensive, and he knew that girls also needed care and education. In 1872, in collaboration with St. Mary Domenica Mazzarello, a young peasant woman of deep spirituality and dedication to the poor girls of Mornese, Don Bosco founded the Institute of the Daughters of Mary Help of Christians, the Salesian Sisters. The goal was to do for girls what the Salesians did for boys: offer education, vocational training, and an environment of love and faith. Moreover, understanding the vital role of the laity in the Church long before the Second Vatican Council, Don Bosco created in 1876 the Association of Salesian Cooperators. These were lay men and women, married or single, who, without taking religious vows, committed themselves to living and sharing the Salesian spirit in the world, in their families, professions, and parishes, supporting works in favor of youth. Together, these three groups formed the core of the great Salesian family. The missionary zeal of Don Bosco was a consuming fire that knew no boundaries. Although he himself never left Europe, his heart embraced the entire world. In 1875, he fulfilled one of his greatest dreams by sending the first Salesian missionary expedition to South America, specifically to the harsh and unexplored region of Patagonia, Argentina. The expedition was led by the young and fearless Don Juan Cagliero. Don Bosco had seen those distant lands, their mountains, rivers, and indigenous inhabitants in a prophetic dream years earlier, with such precise geographical details that they later amazed the very missionaries and explorers who ventured there. From that first expedition onward, the Salesian missionary impulse quickly spread across all continents. Today, the Salesians and the Daughters of Mary Help of Christians are present in more than 130 countries, from the jungles of the Amazon to the metropolises of Asia, continuing the mission to educate, evangelize, and promote the dignity of the most vulnerable youth. Beyond being an educator, builder, and founder, Don Bosco was a tireless writer and a pioneer in using the press for evangelization. He understood early on that a good book can enter where a priest cannot. Over his lifetime, he wrote and published more than 220 titles, including biographies of young saints, such as Dominic Savio, church histories, stories of Italy, manuals of devotion, plays for youth, and apologetic pamphlets. His most famous and enduring editorial work was the Salesian Bulletin, founded in 1877. This magazine, designed to unite cooperators and benefactors and to promote Salesian works, became a communication phenomenon and is still published today in dozens of languages around the world. To print all this material, Don Bosco established his own printing press within the Oratory of Valdoco, equipped with the most modern machines of the time, where boys learned the trades of printer and bookbinder, becoming highly skilled professionals sought after by the Turin job market. Don Bosco's final years were marked by exhausting work and travels throughout Europe to raise funds for his works and for the construction of the Basilica of the Sacred Heart in Rome, at the request of Pope Leo XIII. His body was worn out, but his spirit remained unshakable. He would say, "We will rest in paradise." On January 31, 1888, at the age of 72, Don Bosco gave his soul to God. His last words to his spiritual children were, "Love one another as brothers. Do good to all, harm to none. Tell my young people that I await them all in paradise." His funeral in Turin was a triumph, attended by hundreds of thousands of people. Don Bosco was beatified in 1929 and canonized on Easter Sunday, April 1, 1934, by Pope Pius XI, who had known him personally. He received the official title of Father and Teacher of Youth. Saint John Paul II declared him the patron saint of illusionists and stage magicians, who celebrate his feast by offering free shows for underprivileged children. The life of Saint John Bosco is a dazzling testimony to what God can accomplish through a heart fully surrendered to Him. From a poor and orphaned boy, God made the father of an innumerable multitude. His dreams were not illusions, but the divine blueprint for the salvation of youth. He teaches us that education is a work of the heart, that holiness is possible in the joy of everyday life, and that, with the Eucharist and merry help of Christians as anchors, the boat of our life will always reach a safe harbor. If you know someone who lives the spirit of Don Bosco, dedicating their life to education and love for youth, leave your testimony in the comments. Share this video so more people can learn the story of the father and teacher of youth. Subscribe to the channel and activate the notification bell so you won't miss our upcoming episodes about the great heroes of faith. Prayer to Saint John Bosco. O Saint John Bosco, father and teacher of youth, who, docile to the gifts of the Spirit and open to the realities of your time, were for young people, especially the little and poor, a sign of God's love and predilection. Be our guide on the path of friendship with the Lord Jesus, so that we may discover in Him and in His gospel the meaning of our life and the source of true happiness. Help us to respond generously to the vocation we have received from God, so that in daily life we may be builders of communion and, in communion with the whole Church, collaborate enthusiastically in building the civilization of love. Obtain for us the grace of perseverance in living the Christian life, so that, guided by merry help of Christians, we may one day meet you in the great family of heaven. Amen.